Okay, YouTube, we're going to stay on the subject of trans bathrooms. In North Carolina, in Texas, in Kentucky, in Illinois, in South Carolina, you kind of get the idea. So, everybody makes this out to be about public safety. You can't just let anybody in to any bathroom because that would be unsafe. So let's ignore the fact that anywhere that has these kind of, explicit anti-discrimination policies in place has never experienced this kind of event. Let's ignore that and let's say, okay, let's talk about then what makes a trans identity valid or legitimate. Because if you listen to some of the critics, they say this isn't about the real transgender people. This is about the people who will exploit the law. And so let's ignore that there's a lot of things that could be done to help protect women and children from sexual assault or just physical assault. But let's ignore how we're not talking about those kinds of initiatives, rather than talking about a problem that doesn't exist, which is trans people in the bathroom, on the basis of whatever makes somebody legitimately trans in the eyes of the law. And so it's about identity. And this is a conversation that's happened within trans spaces for decades and is now taking place at a very quick pace here in the public. And so for a long time, there was a certain sect of the trans community who believes that you should transition, move on, become stealth, sort of disappear, just you're a woman now, you're not a trans woman. There are other people who say that, there should be some sort of test for, what makes somebody actually trans. Whether that's medical transition, legal transition, social transition, kind of whatever. There are trans people out there who believe that you have to hit some sort of threshold in order to actually count. Which is an argument, I guess. It's not one that I agree with. If you want to talk about identity being the sort of burden of proof, one, what does that even mean? Are you going to card people who go to the bathroom? But even if we say that, then what's the requirement? Because you have to live as a woman in order to get surgery for a year, typically. Those are the current standards of care. So if you can't get updated identification until after you have surgery, assuming you even want it in the first place, that means you have to wait at least a year while you present female. What are you supposed to do for that year? Where are you supposed to go to the bathroom? What are you supposed to do for insurance work? Things like that. Like with your legal identity in the meantime. So surgery is too high of a standard, particularly given the fact that it's not always accessible to people on their insurance plans, and it's very expensive to pay for out of pocket. And people will say, well, it's a choice, but so is any surgery. Heart surgery is a choice. Hip surgery is a choice. People don't need those things, they choose them, right? If the medical community agrees that gender dysphoria can be treated with physical surgery, just like hip surgery can be treated with physical surgery, they're not going to give you a new hip just because you walk in and ask for one. They're only going to give it to you if you need it. But even though surgery is medically necessary for some trans people, it's not always available to them. So, too high of a burden. And then, where do you go from there? Medical transition, you have to be on hormones. What if there's some medical reason why you can't? assuming you even want to, in the first place, or need to. And what about children whose parents are making their medical choices for them and whose own personal views may not necessarily match what the child wants and persistently, insistently, and consistently asks for? Which is sort of how you look at treating trans children. And you start to realize that there are a lot of problems just from a policy perspective, even if we wanted to introduce one. Whereas self-identification is a sort of much better standard, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what your identification is or says. It's really how you express your gender, if you express a gender at all. And so gender expression is very different. And if we're concerned about privacy, then let's introduce privacy within kind of just bathrooms in general. Move to single occupancy unisex facilities, or more privacy within same-sex facilities, things like that. Like, there are a lot of tangible, practical solutions to this that don't include keeping trans people from existing in public.